A newcomer has made their way into the graphics card market, and this is the RX 580 from ASRock. They also have other variants ranging from the RX 570, RX 560, and 550. Though today we're going to take a look at this one, the flagship of the bunch that they have released here. Of course, it's not a flagship card, but it is the best spec'd card that ASRock are going to be offering, at least for now. And we're also going to take a look at what makes this card so special in particular, or if there's actually anything special about it at all. Let's roll that intro. Welcome back to Tech City. This is Brian coming to you guys today with the 600 gram ASRock Phantom Gaming RX 580. Now, there is no backplate as well, so they've gone with the whole value-orientated lineup, I believe, because they haven't quite provided me with pricing yet, and apparently AMD have already blocked the sales of these cards in EU or Europe due to certain limitations. So it's actually not ASRock's fault. They've just got to pass some laws and regulations, and hopefully they will be for sale in the EU in the future. As it stands though, this card will be hitting shelves in Australia and America, at least to my knowledge. I will update the description below with pricing, but what you're getting with this 600 gram cooler is two fans that go up to 3,800 RPM. I could not believe how much air these two fans were pushing. Of course, they do get extremely loud, and I'll let you guys take a quick listen. However, as you see in the benchmarks later on, 100% fan speeds is really, for me, only testing the max limits of this cooler itself. And also when you've got the stock auto fan settings, it doesn't sound too bad. It goes up to around 55–60% fan speeds. And of course, the sounds at these levels aren't too bad. Now, up until 50 degrees, the fans will switch off completely. And so even in overclocked mode, you don't have to worry about any noise, as even when it's overclocked itself, it only uses around 6 to 7 watts of power. So the idle power consumption doesn't really change at all. But the power consumption on load is a little bit worrisome. You can see that overclocking does indeed put a lot more strain on the GPU itself, going from 145 watt to 175 watt and then near 200 watt when we overclocked this graphics card. Now, you've probably seen the thermal paste video already. If you haven't, I'll link it up here. But we did change the thermal paste around on this graphics card with Gelid GC Extreme, though this is a really good thermal paste. It's some of the best in the biz, so it does speak lengths to the little minor details. We'll ramble about this card a little bit later in the review. Let's pull up some gaming benchmarks for you guys, which I'm sure you're dying to see. First test we have here, 3D Mark Firestrike. You can see that the RX 580, this one on the bench, when I overclock it, the results are phenomenal. We're getting over 16,000 points. Just to put things into perspective, I think that's getting close to the Vega 56, at least out of the box. So this card is a little beast. And keep in mind though, ASRock could have sent over one of their golden samples, as this is personally one of the best scores I've got with an RX 580 and 3D Mark Firestrike. Out of the box, still getting really good scores though, over 14,000 points. Though I will point something out, if you get this graphics card, even just changing that power limit slider, of course it will increase power consumption, but you will get a tangible benefit by just doing one little easy to do trick. And of course, looking at those results, beating out the GTX 1066 GB, both out of the box and overclocked. Though moving on into our first game, Kingdom Come Deliverance. Here we saw a victory for the RX 580, overclocked versus overclocked. I'm looking at mainly these numbers because as an enthusiast, I love overclocking. I love looking at the overclocked figures. So this 1060 itself was no slouch either, went to over 2.05 gigahertz on the core. Though moving over to GTA 5, here we saw a victory again for this overclocked RX 580. Now this is typically a game that does go a little bit in favor of Nvidia, just a tiny bit. So as we can see here over time, AMD has seemed to optimize this game in the driver support for their cards to make do with better frame rates. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the RX 580 getting the edge out in this game too. Move over to Final Fantasy 15, of course, this being an Nvidia title, I did turn off those Nvidia unique features such as Hairworks to make this a fair comparison, and honestly, I don't use them in my everyday gaming life, as I believe they're just not really worth it, especially for some of the frame dips that you can get, not to mention the 0.1% low stuttering. But here we saw the GTX 1060 did edge out the RX 580, both stock and overclock. But that is to be expected, being a relatively new title on PC and also being that of an Nvidia title. Then moving over to PUBG, I always test in the ruins section, lots of stuff going on, lots of pillars, lots of open world, lots of graphically intense settings. 1080p ultra settings. Here we saw the neck and neck battle between these two graphics cards. Though out of the box, the GTX 1060 did really edge out just a little bit over the out-of-the-box RX 580. And moving on to the last game, we've got Ashes of Singularity. I initially thought this was an AMD title, but it seems the NVIDIA card did take the win on the DX11 GPU-focused benchmark. When I change it over to DX12 or Vulkan, I can't specifically test the GPU for some reason. It's only got a CPU-only test. And to be honest, I don't even know what's so appealing about Ashes of Singularity. But anyway, when it all comes down to it, the RX 580 Phantom Gaming from ASRock is actually a really solid attempt for their first go in the graphics card scene. I know a lot of people asked me when I posted a picture up on Instagram of this thing, they were like, why is ASRock even bothering to get in so late in the cycle? And I think it's actually a brilliant idea. They're going to be sending these out to reviewers, they're going to sell a few on the market, and I guess they want to gather as much feedback as possible so when they release the 6 series cards, or if that's what AMD is going to go with, 600 series, they're going to have a product that is perfected by the time it hits the market. So they can get some feedback from me. I think the fan speeds are a little bit too loud at 100%, even though they push a lot of air. I also would like to see a backplate included. Though just besides the backplate, I'd maybe like to see even the ASRock logo light up, even with RGB, and you can change that in software to give it maybe a temperature indicator, so you know if your card's for some reason getting really hot, you can switch the system off. I always do like RGB when it's the functional type. Though speaking of functionality, there's also ASRock's own software that they've included with this graphics card, and it's actually not bad, especially for a first implementation. I like the fact that you can overclock the actual VRAM and change the voltages directly to that VRAM, something that I don't believe I haven't seen in MSI Afterburner for quite some time. You can also save overclocking and custom fan profiles, and there is 3 default modes as well. The first being the out-of-the-box setting, which goes up to 1380 megahertz. Then there's the overclock setting, which goes up to 1430 megahertz. Then there's a silent mode feature, which will actually underclock the card to give you lower temperatures and lower power consumption in order to keep those noises down from the fans themselves. Though one thing I noticed about the overclock profile, it's getting, especially on the core itself, very close to my maximum overclock. When I changed the thermal paste around, the max I could get out of this was about 1450 megahertz. Out of the box, I believe I got just over 1430 megahertz. So they're really capping this card. If you put in that overclocked mode, you may come into some problems overclocking it in general. It may not work. Hence why the default mode, I guess the 1380 megahertz, is guaranteed to work across all cards. Though as for display outs, you've got 1 dual-link DVI, 3 display port outs which support the FreeSync technology, and also a HDMI out if you wish to use that. Anyway guys, when it all comes down to it, the Phantom Gaming from ASRock, not bad at all for a first little attempt. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of this graphics card. Do you have any feedback of your own for ASRock too? I'm sure they'll be listening in the comment section below. Also, I'll update the pricing of these units as that information comes in, and I look forward to catching you guys in another tech video very soon. And if you enjoyed this video, you might want to check out some other videos on the channel, and if you enjoy those, then you might even want to subscribe and hit that bell notification to get notified when the latest tech vids are dropping in your inbox. And I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye. An RX 580 and 3D Mark V Strike. Out of the box, still getting really good scores though, over 1,400,000 points. Oh boy. Though of course, what about the gaming numbers themselves? Let's roll some benchmarks for you guys. First up, Fire Strike. I'm going to show this score because it shows how beast this card is, and also the fine wine technology itself seems to be getting even finer. There may be a fine line between the wine, or it might be fine wine technology. I'm not too sure yet, but anyway, if you enjoyed this video. But as for the simple, clean, black and silver aesthetic, I'm